I want to start with the economy and with you, Rev. It strikes me that Donald Trump was never going to be a leader capable of feeling anyone's suffering or pain. And it would seem that his niece has offered a psychological explanation of why that might be. We don't have time for that as a country, but that is, let's just stipulate that as fact. But I had been under the belief that he cared about the economy, that he took some pride in strengthening the economy. So I'm stunned that there is not an effort to figure out not just how to stabilize the economy, but how to keep the economy functioning by not cutting off unemployment benefits, but plussing them up. If this president wants to keep the economy from slipping into a depression, you would think he would be the one on the phone asking for more relief for unemployed Americans.
Your thinking is right. You would think that would be the case, particularly since that has been his whole pitch to America from the election going forward, that he was a businessman and he thinks in terms of money. Well, what people did not hear, what many of us that are familiar with him said, is he's not a good businessman. He never really managed well. It was more showmanship than it was about making things happen. Didn't have a real board of directors or people that he worked with, and had a business plan. So now we are having to ask ourselves, why can't he make government work? Because he doesn't understand how to make government work or to work with other people. His management skills are not there. And what could have been his most saleable point has ended up to come to haunt him is you played like you were a businessman. You played that on television. You can't play that in the Oval Office. You have to really be an executive, something that he's never been. He has no idea how to get out of this ditch. When you're in a ditch, you do not ask for a shovel. You look for a rope, and he's digging with a shovel further and further in with the nonsense that he does say and the fact that there is no plan. Can you believe we are looking at these headlines you just showed, Nicole, and there is no plan from the White House on how we turn this around?
Well, and Eli Stokols, there is no acknowledgement that the pandemic is the cause for the symptom of the headlines I just showed. The reason the economy has cratered is because this country doesn't have a testing program that has a turnaround time of less than 7 to 14 days in some parts of this country. This country doesn't have contact tracing because without testing, who and where are you tracing? The other problem the president has is he is increasingly isolated. He was rebuked from both ends of the political divide for his tweet suggesting delaying the election. And I want to read you this from the New York Times reporting that we quoted from the lead. Quote, far from a strongman, Mr. Trump has lately become a heckler inside his own government, promoting medical conspiracy theories on social media, playing no constructive role in either the management of the coronavirus pandemic or the negotiation of an economic rescue plan in Congress, and complaining endlessly about the unfairness of it all. I mean, if he were somebody else, you know, you would forward the Zoom counseling services. It just sounds pathetic.
There are a lot of pathologies, Nicole, that we could unpack here, but you're right. The undergirding point underneath all of this is that this is a president who reacts to television and is just incapable of foresight, planning, and of leveraging all the powers of government. From the beginning of the pandemic, he thought he could talk his way out of it, to bluster and bluff and convince Americans that it was okay. Obviously, that doesn't work when the caseloads are rising, and they've been rising now for 5 months. This president has never taken the responsibility that a normal president would take, and he has never connected some very obvious dots that until you control the pandemic, the economy isn't coming back because people will not have the confidence to go out and return to normal life. And he just has not been able to grasp that. That is the fundamental problem with the approach. That's why when I talk to people on the campaign and they talk about strategy and they talk about running on white fears, on trying to, really scare white voters about the suburbs and about the mobs in the street and the radical left and defunding the police, when you say, well, what about the pandemic? That seems to be the most salient issue for voters. What's the message on that? It's only within the last couple of weeks that the president has even started coming back to the podium to just half-heartedly discuss some of the issues around the pandemic, but there's still no national plan. And the president's advisors kind of shrug, and they make it clear that that's just not something that this president is going to be capable of mustering a serious response to this pandemic. That's why the country is where it is. That's why the president's poll numbers are where they are. And that's why he continues to try to distract and to talk his way out of this. Today, he's predicting that next year will be the best economic year. He's selling this optimism, but it's just not believable. And, you know, what a normal president would be doing is understanding that this is actually the day that unemployment insurance runs out. What's our plan to deal with that? And it's only now in the last couple of days that the White House has even engaged and started talking about this publicly. They're attacking Democrats. Democrats passed a bill extending unemployment insurance back in May. The president opposed it. The eviction moratorium ran out on Friday, and the White House only this week started talking about, oh, yeah, we want to repair that. They are just incredibly slow to react here, and all these problems have compounded, and I think that explains the president's political standing, and that explains, of course, some of the panicky behavior you're seeing from him.
Well, panicky behavior or true colors. This is how the New York Times describes what he's doing instead of dealing with the pandemic. David Jolly, quote, "It's the kind of language resonant of conspiracy theorists, cranks, and defeated candidates, not an incumbent living in the White House." And here's that language. Let me play some of Donald Trump on delaying the election.
I don't want to delay. I want to have the election. But I also don't want to have to wait for 3 months and then find out that the ballots are all missing and the election doesn't mean anything. Are all these stories right about the fact that these elections will be fraudulent, they'll be fixed, they'll be rigged, and everyone's looking at it? And a lot of people are saying, you know, that probably will happen.
So not a lot of people know about this, but Jim Baker and Jimmy Carter actually looked at voter fraud after the 2000 recount. You may know about this. And it isn't actually a thing. I mean, they came out with some sort of compromise recommendations that having an ID is pretty sensible. If it was in the era of Blockbuster, if you needed an ID to rent a movie, it wasn't an unreasonable thing. But the idea that there's widespread voter fraud in this country is a proven lie. What is the end game here, Congressman Jolly, of the president saying things like that?
Right. Or if there is an end game. Nicole, there's a saying in politics that fish always flop around before they die. You see candidates engage in erratic behavior when they know they're going to lose. It's hard to measure that behavior with Donald Trump because he's been erratic since the beginning. But clearly, this is someone who is reaching to justify a loss or to look for somewhere to blame. And I'd say, look, to Eli's comments and to the Rev, at some point, and you're starting to see this, Donald Trump is going to have to embrace the crisis we're in, not because he is capable of fulfilling the role of an empathetic leader and the consoler in chief. He can't. Donald Trump will not change. But the reason he's going to have to act within his wings being clipped, if you will, is because every other part of his messaging is so disconnected with the reality in America. This is a man who a year ago announced his reelection campaign was Keep America Great. Well, one of the most important polls you watch week over week right now is whether we're heading in the right direction or the wrong direction. And about 70% of the country continues to say week over week we're going in the wrong direction. So if Donald Trump's machine is suggesting our messaging for November is keep the course, keep America great, but 70% of the nation says we're going in the wrong direction, that's why you're seeing this ceiling where he's hitting 40% in head-to-head polls against Joe Biden. And so at some point, he's going to have to either embrace that and work within the economic and pandemic crisis within the conversation on race, or he's simply going to have to accept a loss and then look for something to blame, which in this case may be mail-in voting or rigging or whatever conspiracy he will come up with.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.